Hey guys, Derek here to bring you an untrimmed beard video of what I think are two of the best headsets available for, or consumer available headsets available for simming, whether that be racing, flying, whatever you're doing. And with that, I have the HP Reverb G2, and I have the more expensive Pimax 8KX. And I'm basically just going to want to talk about first impressions as a tech geek and tech nerd. Sorry about that. What I think of the two, which one I'm going to be keeping, and, kind of go from there. And if you're like me, I watched like literally every single video I could find before buying either of these. And, opinions are pretty all over the place for both headsets. So I have a couple points I want to talk off. This is kind of unscripted. It's more so going to be, first 10 hours that I experienced of both headsets. So I have over 1,000 hours in Steam VR, most of which are in my G2. I had a Quest 2 and a Quest before that. So the quick background story, I guess, is I went to a VR arcade and I kind of wanted to try it on my own because the headsets there, I could tell, they're not that clear. And I originally wanted to play Half-Life Alyx, so I went out and bought, the one I could find at just a local Best Buy just so I could, dabble in it and play. And it was over $700 for the original Quest because I bought the more storage edition or whatever because that's all they had and I was stubborn. I just wanted to play. So I wound up buying the Quest, and I can immediately tell, this is awesome. And I plugged it in with the link cable, but the quality, I can tell right away, the screen door effect, they say, the resolution. I'm like, oh, this would be better if it was just more clear. And then knowing my luck, about a week or so later, the Quest 2 got released. And I'm like, cool. So I sold my Quest and got the Quest 2, and it was pretty amazed at the clarity, especially for that price, which is nuts because, Facebook sells your stuff or whatever they do, so they can have it that cheap. But then I wanted to try high-end PC VR. I've always been a PC tech enthusiast, so I have a 3090 based system here. Ever since I was little, I was always on computers and trying to find all the best stuff and optimize builds, performance benchmarking. I'm a tinkerer. My girlfriend can vouch for that. I like tinkering and testing things. Not quite as much as I like playing, but it's part of the fun for me, in all honesty. So that brings me to the G2 versus the Pimax 8KX as a sim racer. I primarily do iRacing. I do a little bit of R-Factor 2 and then AMS2 as well, but mainly it's iRacing and a little bit of RF2. And those are just the sims that stood out to me and are the most enjoyable, so those are the ones I stick with. Now that being said, the G2, just to get started with, kind of the comparisons, it's not really a fair comparison, in my opinion, just because the Pimax, I'm going to break this down in Canadian dollars, was $16.10, and that's with a coupon code with Amazon, and I actually am going to be returning this. And that's because 2 days after I bought it and it got delivered, it went on sale on the Pimax site for over $300 less, which is the cost of their controllers. So basically, for $100 more, I got the Pimax 8KX already ordered. It's on the way with controllers for almost the same price. That's just my luck with this VR crap, man. I buy the Quest 2 comes out a week later. I buy the Pimax literally 2 days after it gets delivered, on sale for $300 less. Anyways, that's besides the point. I'm returning this one to Amazon. I originally wanted to spend more money and buy it off of Amazon just because their return policy, when Pimax isn't, if it's open, you can't return it basically. Amazon with 30 days for any reason. So comparing the two, obviously, the thing that PC enthusiasts want for VR is immersion. So clarity on the G2 is in the middle better. It is. It's noticeably a bit sharper in the G2. However, the image in the 8KX, all around the lens, that all around clarity is there. So in the G2, no matter, you can't get away from it. If you're looking in the center, it's crystal clear. If you look at text in the sides and the corners and whatnot, it is fuzzy. There's no escaping that. That's just how it is. And here, the entire FOV isn't fully clear. There is a little bit of lens distortion, but honestly, it completely goes away after a while, or you just get used to it or whatever. So when I'm driving, I literally see nothing, which is amazing. But the edge-to-edge clarity is a lot better in the Pimax 8KX. That's just my experience, reading the dash in the car or whatever, and I just look my eyes down and I can read it. Here, it's a little bit fuzzy, but when I look at it, it's crystal clear. So the price comparisons for these, again, I paid $16.10 for this, and after tax, I paid about $9.50 for this. Again, Canadian dollars, our money's not worth much for some reason. So, take the prices with a grain of salt. So the overall visual experience, the thing is with the Pimax, again, like I was saying, it's not a fair comparison because this is so much more money. And if you're going to talk about controllers, again, you need base stations. Again, you need to pick what controllers you want, whether that be, some off of the marketplace on Facebook that you want, or like you can probably find some cheap used ones. But if you're going new everything, I bought one base station off the marketplace for $100. I'm probably going to need to buy another one for $100. With just 1.0 base stations, and then the controllers for these are like over $300. So when you factor it all in, I'm spending about $1,900 to $2,000 Canadian dollars for the premium VR experience. And then with this, I would still classify it as a premium VR experience, but for under $1,000. That being said, the tracking is something I can talk about on the G2 in my experience. I did play Half-Life Alyx, and I played Pavlov, and I played what is it called, Contractors, and I played multiple games. Beat Saber, it's fine. Half-Life Alyx, oddly enough, I had zero issues in almost the entire playthrough of the game with controller tracking. No matter where, I do weird things to test it, and it would still track fine. But in games like Pavlov and Contractors, that's just not the case. So I don't know what they did in that game, but it seemed to work perfectly fine. Now, when the controllers go obviously under the cameras, that's where the problems start happening, and Population 1. So I would classify Population 1 and Contractors as nearly not playable at a competitive level with this thing. The reason why is your gun gets stuck at the bottom position, and every game reacts differently when the gun gets out of range at the bottom position. And what I mean by that is in Pavlov, let's say your gun's stuck at the bottom position, as long as your left hand becomes visible, I can still aim and hip fire, because it knows that your right hand is locked and it can't see it, so it just assumes its position is still there. So I can still bring up my left hand and hip fire and still be fairly accurate. So that's no problem with the G2 and Pavlov. However, playing Contractors, if you see one controller, it still gets locked. Like, it needs like both in the image or something like that. So with Contractors, I either have to look down when I'm sprinting or bring my hands awkwardly out in front of me at all times. So Contractors does not work as well as Pavlov. Also, Population 1, if your hand's locked at the bottom position unseen from the camera and you bring out your left hand, it thinks you're flying. So it thinks your hands are so far apart that your flying animation begins and you're trying to hip fire and your hand comes off of the gun. So that was a problem in Population 1. So again, you either need to look down or play with your hands a little bit awkwardly in front of you. For me, there was just no really escaping that. Again, Half-Life Alyx just worked absolutely perfect for some reason. I literally couldn't mess it up no matter basically what I did. And then I also play Thrill of the Fight Boxing. So the controllers have these huge round rings. Let me just grab one here. Sorry, bear with me. Where is it? Here they are. Sorry about that. So these controllers obviously have these humongous round flexible rings on them. Like, they're bouncy, right? So when I threw a punch in the Oculus Quest 2, I did like a wrist flick at the edge of my punch, or at the end of my punch, to get extra power because it measures based off velocity. And when I tried doing it with this, the ring would wobble and my hand would just go flying into the ground. And that would happen on both controllers. If I can fling it hard enough, my hand's just gone. So that's something. I don't think the controllers, they work. I don't think they're the best by any means. They're comfortable, though. Comfortable and lighter than they appear based on the humongous size. But the tracking at the bottom position is an issue in some games. Half-Life, it wasn't. Pavlov, you can deal with it. And the other Population 1 and Contractors is basically just a no-go for me. It's kind of frustrating. That being said, though, with the Pimax 8KX, if we're talking a little bit about this, so the initial first impressions, I put the headset on, dialed in the IPD to where I felt comfortable, and I got fishbowled, or fish-eyed, whatever you want to call that, where everything kind of looked warped. It was like I put on a new pair of glasses for the very first time, and I was like I had to adjust quite heavily. And then that kind of went away after about 20 minutes or so. But then when I put the headset back on, I would kind of get that initial impression again. And what happened eventually, like after my first session, I really doubt it's going to show here. I'll throw an image up here. After literally one race, I took the headset off and I noticed some scratches vertically, which is weird to me because where it is on the eye, it would be up here on my glasses. And I only look side to side. I'm not doing this. So when I'm racing, I actually tried to squish the headset as tight as I can against my face and tried to reach the lens like this. I can barely make contact. So I'm not sure. I'm assuming I caused the scratch, but literally after 10 minutes, I noticed a scratch on the lenses. And I would have to assume that it wasn't there before, that it had to be done based on my glasses. So that's something to be aware of if you're a glasses user. I switched afterwards to the thicker face foam, and oddly enough, that fishbowl effect was completely gone. The image looked incredible, and not to mention, it's way more comfortable. So I have the big schnoz here, and it would get bruised pretty bad actually. So to the point where if I lean my head sideways with the Pimax on the thin face foam, there'd be so much pressure on my nose, my eyes would begin to water. So I just couldn't tilt my head side to side in it. And when I put on the thicker foam, it felt almost as comfortable as the G2 did, which is amazing because it's humongous. But that alone, so the thing is, even with it's 75 hertz right now. I know that they have a 90 hertz on a different driver update, and they're working on 90 hertz for the newer one. So obviously, 90 hertz on the 8KX is going to be a thing that's going to be happening with the native resolution. However, you can upscale to 114 hertz, which I tried, but the image drop off just isn't quite worth it. And I tried doing upscaling and upping the super sampling in Steam to try to see if I could match the native image quality while still having the 114 hertz, because I'm a tinkerer and I need to see if I can get 114 hertz with the best picture quality. But you just kind of can't beat the native setting even with the sampling cranked up. And then, you know, obviously with this high of a resolution, it's going to take a toll on performance even on a 3090 system. And, you know, this is going to be rough estimates, but I think it's like Steam resolution on the HP Reverb G2 render resolution, aka the performance of your game, is about 3160 by 3120 or so. And in this thing, it's like 410 something by 3000 something, if I remember correctly. So you would think in theory the performance hit is going to be a lot more on the Pimax due to its higher render resolution. Oddly enough, I'm finding my games are running better in the Pimax. Even, like, I get it, it's 75 hertz, but even when I did, tried to match the resolution with upscaling 114, I was still above 100 FPS in games where on the native res in this, I couldn't achieve that. So it's interesting to me that I don't know if there's a Windows Mixed Reality performance loss in between the transition of that to Steam VR, but I'm finding my performance in games, especially R Factor 2, is a lot stronger in the Pimax, and I don't 100% know why. But just to give a lens quality, you can see the lens size here of the HP Reverb G2, and apparently it's about 94 degree FOV. I haven't actually tested it. I try to squish it as close to my face as possible to get the biggest sweet spot. And then obviously if you look at the 8KX here, I am going to be returning this again. But like, just look, like freaking what? Like, obviously once you see that, there's just no going back, man. I didn't think FOV was that big, and it's one of the things that you're fine with what you like the G2 until you see this thing. And then you're like, oh frick, right? Like, maybe I'm not returning this thing after all, right? Like, I really wanted to test it, and if it didn't blow me away, I was going to return it, and that's why I wanted to buy it off of Amazon, because their return policy is more lenient. But I wound up ordering my finalized version once, you know, that comes in with controllers from Pimax. Now, that being said, it's a hefty chunk of change, not to mention a good PC to run it. But the initial impressions, basically, you know, with the G2, they're both, people, I think, overestimate how difficult this stuff is. Like, Pimax support was fantastic too. So they sent me 2 emails. One, once, you know, it was ordered, be like, hey, here are all the steps you can take, here's videos to watch if you need help setting up. And then once it actually got delivered, like a day before it got delivered, they emailed me like, hey, you know, feel free, we can do a team viewer session, or, you know, we'll call you, just let us know and we'll help you set it up as much as possible, and, you know, just to ensure you have the best experience. And I'm like, you know, I got 2 support emails from these guys before the thing even arrived. And then when I did actually, you know, I thought I was having an issue with the base station, I emailed them and they got back to me in like an hour or something nuts like that. So that goes a long way. Apparently, you know, I've read on Reddit and stuff that their support was like trash, and I guess they got word of that and up to their game, or, you know, maybe it's a special case with me. For whatever reason, they were always wanting to help, which is awesome, because, you know, obviously a company like that, when you read, if you do Google search on Pimax, everyone's ripping on their customer service, and now it's like, I didn't even have customer service with HP. But yeah, so now I have the base station. It was just a height issue, for the record. I needed to put my base station up a lot higher than it immediately picked up, and boom, I was on my way, no problems. Now with simming, you technically don't need base stations. However, you're not going to get forward and back movement, so you'll only have the tilting and side to side. So if you wanted to move up and down in your car, You wouldn't be able to do that without at least one base station. So I got that base station for $100. I've had zero tracking issues. And one of the main things for me with something like iRacing and why the Pimax is a lot more convenient for me is because in the HP Reverb G2, if you set your headset down somewhere for too long, it thinks that's your center play area now. And then when you put it back on, you'll do this, and your car is moving around with you because it doesn't know where your play space is anymore. So what I do is if I'm loading up like a 35 car session AI on the Nordschleife and iRacing, and it takes like over 5 minutes, 8 minutes to load, I have to plot my G2 on the headrest of the car seat behind me, so it's kind of at my head position, and then I can walk away and come back, and it knows the position again. But I've had so many issues where I just put the headset somewhere for like 3 minutes or less, and I pick it back up, and everything warps with me. I'm like, oh, frick, and I got to clear my environment data or just reboot and start it all over again, which is really annoying. And with Lighthouse tracking, that's not a thing. It just always knows where it is. That's a convenience thing for me. Also comfort. Again, once I put on the thick face foam, I'm still going to test the FOV between thick and thin face foam, but I can tell you as soon as I put it on, it's the FOV is so wide that you don't notice it. That's the immersion part of the Pimax 8KX, is no matter where you look, you're in the virtual world. When immediately you put on the G2 and you feel like a little claustrophobic, like you're in a binocular vision in a box, right? You get that vibe instantly in the G2. Once you play it for in the Pimax for like 30 minutes and you come back, then it's like, ugh. So the initial impressions as a simmer are that, you know, the sound, there is no sound. Just say there is no sound. Imagine if you're buying this version with this audio, please just act like there is no audio. All right, like 100% volume, it's the worst. So I plug in, well, I do like the audio jack, there's 2 audio jacks too, right? So I have Bose noise canceling headphones, and to be honest, after using those in racing, I'd rather use my Bose headphones over the Reverb G2 audio. Now the G2 audio, the spatial off-ear speaker, sounds incredible. It's scary to the point where I could actually compare it to a pair of $450 Bose noise canceling headphones, and the music quality, like I put on a Spotify playlist and just cruise the Nordschleife for hours, and the quality of the sound is just remarkable in the G2. And I'm gonna say sound is basically non-existent. Act like you're buying this thing without sound. You need your own sound if you're buying that kit. So this is just first impression kind of rambling for anyone else that's interested in either one of these headsets, that the G2 and the Pimax 8KX are insanely different price. They shouldn't technically be compared with each other. Just the fact that the G2 is a comparison to the Pimax 8KX is incredibly impressive, not to mention comes with controllers and inside-out tracking, though it may not be the best depending on what game you play. Again, Beat Saber, Half-Life Alyx, literally zero issues. Contractors and Pop 1, I just literally wouldn't play just because of that one-handed, lost hand tracking issue. And again, once you see, this is basically human FOV. No matter where you look, you're in the world, and in the G2, you look elsewhere and you're just black box. So it breaks immersion, and you don't really realize it until you start getting used to this insane piece of equipment. So comfort's there, sound doesn't exist. The edge-to-edge clarity, though it's not as sharp in the middle, is better. I like the visual experience more than the G2 even. And for $1,600, I should be enjoying the visual experience a lot more. Obviously, the FOV is a clear thing that I didn't think it was that important in a VR headset, to be honest, until I saw this thing. And I was gonna get I was gonna pre-order the Vive Pro 2 and then watch some reviews and realize, if I'm spending, was it Canadian, like $1,100 Canadian for just the headset, let's see what else is out there, and because that might not be that big of a jump since I'm used to the visual quality of the G2, and what else is out there that's a big enough jump that can actually justify a higher price point. And the only thing I came across as a consumer is the Pimax 8KX, or maybe another 5K Super with 180 hertz, but I'd rather go for that image quality because for me The immersive part is it kind of looking and feeling real, not necessarily the refresh rate. And to be honest, going from 90 hertz to 75 hertz worried me, but after a few minutes, you kind of forget about it and you're just focused on the road and focused on your driving, and it's perfectly enjoyable at 75 hertz, even though that 90 hertz option, again, is going to be there, or the upscaled 114. So all of that being said, again, I am returning this thing due to that little, I'm buying a Polywatch fix for the scratch, and I'm going to be sending it back, and then I'm getting the on sale version from Pimax, because that's just my luck with VR headsets, and with the controllers, valve knuckle controllers, so I might have to get one more base station. So I believe that is going to basically be the end all be all for consumer PC enthusiast VR setup. Freaking expensive, but it's a deep rabbit hole. Once you, like, I started at a Quest 1, so in being a PC and tech nerd enthusiast, you spend more doing these baby steps by a large margin than you do if you just went all out off the bat. So me and graphics cards, every year I got a 980 Ti, a 1080 Ti, a 2080 Ti, a 3090. I've always just gone right to the best step, and that saves me in the future from, I need like an extra few frames for this. In VR, FPS is incredibly important. That's why I went with the 3090, just to get everything possible. Because if you're at 73 FPS in the headset, that's noticeable compared to 75 locked. So it's important to get all the FPS possible. I wouldn't recommend anything less than a 3080 for either one of these headsets. Sure, you can have an enjoyable experience and tone down the Steam super sampling resolution, but the 2080 Ti was too weak for me. I needed I needed more than a 2080 Ti to run these things the way I wanted to run these things. So there's a lot of things to keep in mind when buying these. Again, kind of elaborating what I was saying off earlier, the experience of tinkering, and you spend more time setting it up than you do playing. 10 minutes! I swear, I screwed in the base station up there where that cable's going. I set it to native 1 render. The only thing I did was I like playing with the settings. Like, I did the upscaling test with super sampling to see if that could be justified, but I'd rather just do the native. And then I just played around a little bit with the brightness and contrast settings. That was it. 10 minutes, I swear. Screwed in the base station, downloaded PyTools, base station picked up the headset, started iRacing, adjusted my IPD, adjusted the contrast up 1. I'm playing. It's not that hard. It does not tinker this, tinker that. There's a lot more tinkering to be done if you have the lower spec hardware, though. So if you need to try to push the 75 FPS on a lower res and maybe lower a couple in-game settings, but for me, I didn't need to do any of that. Like with the 3090 system, it just worked on 75 hertz with my existing iRacing settings I was using on the G2. And again, the FOV, you just can't, like, the lenses are massive. Like, you just can't come back once you see that. And that's why I wanted this over the Vive Pro 2, is that, the G2 to Vive Pro 2, I can't justify it. So I needed to try out the 8KX, and I'm happy I did, and I'm not looking back now. I'm going to be selling my G2. Once my second 8KX comes in from Pimax and the controllers, I might do a bit more in-depth review. I don't know. This was just kind of all of my impressions rambled, and if you're one of those crazy guys like me that's going to watch every single video on these two headsets to compare and try to find out every perspective you can, because there's a lot of them out there, but the G2 is basically summed up with incredible picture quality in the dead center of the headset, and when you're in motion in game, you don't notice the fuzziness around the outside, maybe just with reading text, and if you look a little bit, you're fine. It's also, the G2's comfier, it just is. It's lighter, it's comfier. The sound is absolutely incredible, and the tracking is okay. So G2 is, it's not by any means an entry-level PC VR headset. It is a high-end PC VR headset. However, with me, I went to the Quest 2, to the Reverb G2, to the 8KX, all within like 8 months, and I would have saved myself a big chunk of change if I did the research. To be fair, I didn't know how much I was actually going to get invested in VR, and this setup behind me while not the cleanest looking setup here, I had a Logitech G25. Don't mind the cabinet, that looks like it's from the 70s. I had a Logitech G25 here, and I wanted to see what more immersive setups felt like. So I went from buying a Quest 1, and then I went from a Quest 2 to a G25, and then I went from a G25 to a Fanatec CSW 2.5 McLaren GT3 rim V3 pedals, and then I picked up a car seat in the wooden rig, painted it, and then decided, with the G2 in that comparison, that was my sim racing end all be all setup. And then I saw the Pimax AKX and knew I just had to try it. So if you're an enthusiast, honestly, and you're comparing the two, I would say if you're an enthusiast, go with an 8KX. If you can spare that chunk of change, you'll be happy you did. Again, that first impression, I got completely fishbowled, and I got worried that it would be a waste of money and that I would need to return it. But the fishbowl effect went away with a bit of IPD adjustment, and then when I started driving, I got used to it. But then again, with a thicker face foam, it all just came together just perfectly immediately. I never got any fishbowl effect or weird put on my first pair of glasses effect just because the lenses are so massive. It actually is a little bit shocking to get used to. And when I'm sitting in, last thing I want to say is when I'm sitting in my car seat, I measured it on both. I can see the left rear view mirror or left mirror in the car, but it's partially cut off, and then I can see most of the windshield in the G2. In the Pimax, I can see my entire left window, I can see the entire windshield, and if I look right, I can even see my right rear view mirror. And that does add to the sense of speed. Even though it's 75 hertz, it adds to the sense of speed, being able to see more objects fly by you. And it is a more immersive experience. And I'm looking forward to, I haven't tried the 90 hertz on an older driver yet. I'm assuming they're going to do it with a newer driver. But when I get more time, I'll try the 90 hertz. And I'm assuming that sense of speed is going to be even greater. And I couldn't imagine their 180 hertz headset. But again, the visual quality is really important for me in terms of VR. So last thing I want to add, I promise. The biggest thing for me between the 8KX and the G2 over something like the Quest 2 is I'm a gamer. I can play for hours. So my experience with the Quest 2 is that after about 40 minutes or so of driving, especially because you're looking into the distance for so long, my eyes would start getting strained. So after, I think about 45 minutes, maybe an hour was my cutoff where my eyes started hurting. And I remember even going to bed after, over an hour of Assetto Corsa back in the day. And I was going to bed and my eyes, I was laying there like trying to sleep. And my eyes were burning. I was kind of burning while I was laying down. And the biggest thing for someone else just trying out VR, might race for half an hour in the Quest 2, be perfectly happy. For someone like me, I just keep going. I can just keep going and have fun. So the G2, the biggest difference between the G2 and the Quest 2 for me, again, I sold the Quest 2 like a week after I had the G2. There was just no comparison for, both quality, color, sharpness, sound. The whole experience was just completely different. I know some people are actually, for some reason, prefer the Quest 2. I can't see that by any means. But the G2, I kid you not, I had the headset on for about 5 hours and just consistently going at it. Maybe occasionally taking my headset off to pick a new track or whatever and then putting it back on. Actually, with taking it off and putting it back on, I was in over 8 hours. And I came out with my eyes perfectly fine. That's what's incredible about this high end of a headset. That goes for the 8KX as well. I did 8KX for about 3 consecutive hours in racing, and my eyes are fine. The G2, I kid you not, I did an 8-hour session, and my eyes were fine. I don't get motion sick at all anymore. Again, with VR, some people get motion sick. I had to take the first few days kind of slower and drive slowly in my racing sim, and then I was perfectly fine after that. But again, that visual quality, if you're an actual, not just someone who's into VR, wants to see it, wants to experiment, but you're an actual gamer, you're looking to practice your racing, practice your driving, you want to be able to do an endurance race or something like that, and you're a gamer and you actually want to experience and get better, the G2, the 8KX, they're going to allow you to play for hours and hours and hours on end without eye strain. And that's something that the Quest 2, I just couldn't do. I'd have to get out of the headset after about an hour because my eyes were strained. And these ones perfectly fine. I kid you not, over 8-hour session I spent one Saturday morning to right through to early evening or evening. I was in just basically in the headset the whole time and taking off the select track car, put it back on and then perfectly fine. And that to me is worth the extra chunk of change over something like the Quest 2 immediately. The fact that I get to be able to play it for 4 hours consecutively, having a great time, no eye strain, that's worth money in itself. So that's going to basically sum it up. The 8KX is going to be the one I'm sticking with. I have been incredibly impressed, not only with their customer service, but with the headset in general. Once I got that thick foam on, I'm going to know that for next time, that once my new headset comes in, I'm immediately taking off the thin foam and putting on the thick foam before I put it on my head, just in case it was my glasses that scratched it. But it's kind of weird that I've never had that issue with any other headset, and then after probably 10 minutes, I noticed a scratch. So that was a little crap for me, because it's like, I just spent $1,600. I don't want to look at a scratch, so luckily I can return it, and I'm going to stick with the 8KX. And it is a deep rabbit hole to go down, especially as a sim racer. There's always more, and if there isn't, 1 year later, there's always going to be more. So as enthusiasts, we do always seek for the best tech, and right now that's the 8KX, and I'm more than happy with my wheel setup now. It feels great. iRacing with the IRFFB software is incredible, and the Pimax 8KX adds to it. So yeah, I'm going to be keeping the 8KX. My G2 is going to be going up for sale. Incredible VR headset, but as an enthusiast, I think for me, the 8KX is worth the extra chunk of change and the extra immersion. My friends that don't care about VR, or my cousin that doesn't care about VR, tried this headset, and when he came out and tried the G2, and then he came out, he said, like, he doesn't care about this stuff really, but he said Pimax, no question, 100%, not even close. So to someone that doesn't analyze every little detail, that was his initial impression with it too. So yeah, that's going to wrap it up. 8KX is what we're going to be sticking with. I've had amazing experiences, and it was a really eye-opening experience with the G2. And, thanks to all the Facebook groups on both Pimax and the G2 side. They've been both very active and helpful with any questions. So if you aren't in one of these Facebook groups, even if you don't have the headset yet, I would recommend getting into one of these groups. Ask what questions you have, because everyone has their own opinions, and they're all important before buying such an expensive piece of hardware. So I'd really recommend getting in the Facebook group. Again, every headset is going to feel a little bit different on anyone's face. So one person say it might not be comfortable. Like for me, the thin face foam, my eyes would literally water when I tilted my head, because the pressure on my nose was so high, and I would come out with a purple nose. And then I switched face pads, and it was like the most comfortable experience, almost as comfortable as the G2. So yeah, that's my impressions. I've said I'm going to wrap it up like 10 times now, so that'll be it. Thank you guys. Comment if you have any questions below. Again, get in one of the Facebook groups if you're interested in one of these headsets. I'll try to answer any questions if you have any as well. Again, 8KX is going to be the new king for Sims and for PC, high-end PC VR in general. And once I get my Knuckles controllers and the new headset in, I'll be doing some more testing. So that's it. Thanks. Bye for now, guys.